Hello. The objective of this video is to discuss factoring quadratics in the form x squared plus bx plus c. And first we should recognize the fact that a quadratic is anything that can be written in the form ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are real numbers and a is not equal to 0. Now you notice I said the form x squared plus bx plus c. I don't have the a in front here. We're going to work with quadratics that just have a coefficient on the x squared of 1. So when you're looking at those, we're going to go back a minute to talk about the multiplying. When we multiplied polynomials, we did a lot of work where we multiplied a binomial times a binomial, and many times the result was a quadratic. So let's take a look at this one. When we do that distributive property here, we're going to distribute this x across both terms here and this 7 across both terms there. X times x gives you x squared. 7 times x gives you, x times x gives you x squared. X times negative 5 gives you negative 5x. 7 times x gives you positive 7x. 7 times negative 5 gives you negative 35. And then we found that we had like terms here in the middle, so we combine those and we get x squared plus 2x minus 35. Adding those coefficients to get the new coefficient of the combined like term. Now you'll notice that these two numbers, when multiplied, gave us this number on the end, the constant on the end. And those two numbers, when added, became our coefficient in the middle. Factoring is going backwards, going from your answer, your product here, to the two factors you had to multiply to get that number, or that term, or that quadratic, I should say. So we're going from this back to two binomials. To do that, we're going to look at the last term and ask ourselves, what numbers multiply to give me this number, and what numbers add together to give me this number. The steps we're going to do that. We're going to start off by drawing the butt. Two sets of parentheses, kind of looks like a little image of a butt. Then we're going to put an x on the left side of each cheek. X here, x there. Now this is only true for quadratics that have a coefficient of 1 for your x squared. Not true for the ones that have something other than 1 in front of the x squared. Well, it's another lesson altogether. Step 3, find the two factors of c, the two things that multiply to give you the c, that add up to give you b. Write them with their sign on the right sides of the cheeks. So let's take a look at an example of how this works. Looking at this example, first step, draw the butt. Second step, what multiplies together to, second step is put the x's in. Then we have to figure out what multiplies together to give me 12, but adds to give me 7. The factors of 12 are 1 times 12, 2 times 6, and 3 times 4. Well, 1 and 12, when I add those together, they're going to give me 7. No. 2 and 6 is going to give me 8. 3 and 4 does give me 7. So I'm going to have a plus 3 and a plus 4 here. So I believe I have correctly factored this trinomial quadratic. To figure out for sure, I'd multiply to double check my answer. Doing that distributive property, x times x is x squared, x times 4, 4x, 3 times x is 3x, 3 times 4 is 12. Combine those like terms in the middle, I get 7x plus 12. So I do end up getting the original trinomial or quadratic there. Another example here. Start off, draw the butt, that's step 1. Step 2, put in the x's. Step 3, find out what numbers multiply to give me negative 24. The signs are part of it. and add to give me a positive 5. So my factors of negative 24, I have negative 1 and 24, negative 2 and 12, negative 3 and 8, negative 4 and 6. If I try going higher than 4, a 5 is not going to go into it, and then we're going to repeat these values here. So these are all my factors. Now I put the negatives on the front ones, but technically the negatives could be on either one. Negative times a positive is what's going to give me the negative there. Now I have to look to find two numbers that when added together, two of these factors that when added together are going to give me 5. Well, negative 1 and 24, even if I made the 24 negative and the 1 positive, when I add them, they're not going to be anywhere near 5. But the 3 and the 8, if I add a negative 3 and a positive 8, I do get a positive 5. So I'm going to have an x minus 3 and an x plus 8. Quickly double checking, we do our distributive property here. X times x, x squared, x times 8 plus 8x, negative 3 times x, negative 3x, negative 3 times 8, negative 24. These two do combine to give me the 5x, which gives me back to the original trinomial there. This is the correct factoring of that quadratic. Next one. This is why I put the tape here. Here we got some larger numbers, but the process is still the same. I'm going to have an x here, an x here. When I've got a positive here and a negative here, the only way I can have two numbers that multiply to give me a positive but add to give me a negative is if they are both negative numbers. So I'm looking at factors of 75. 1, 75, 3, 25, 5, and 15. Well, 1 and 75, they're both negative. They're not going to add up to negative 28. But 3 and 25, if they're both negative, when I add them together, they're going to give me negative 28. So that is the correct factoring of that quadratic. And I could go through the double check, but that is definitely the correct translation there, factoring there. Here's a nice little table for you to have. When the quadratic has both signs positive, your two binomials are going to be both positive with a plus sign in between. When you have a negative and a positive, negative in the middle, positive in the end, both binomials are going to have negatives in the middle. When you have two negatives in your quadratic, one's going to be negative, one's going to be positive in the factoring there. The larger factor is going to be negative. When the middle is negative and the outside is negative here, the larger factor will be negative. When the middle is positive and the outside is negative, well, the B is positive, the C is negative, the larger factor will be positive and the smaller factor will be negative. See you in class.